Today, we're going to look at the reasons that the United States got involved in the Korean War and the Vietnam War, because again, those are halfway around the world from us. And really, the reason that we get involved in both is the same: it is to stop the spread of communism. Um, the United States feels very strongly that communism is not a good system for people to live in because you take away individual choice and individual freedom. Both of these countries were being pushed primarily by the Soviet Union as well as internal forces to become communism. As with any conflict, some people in the country were okay with communism and others were not. So, again, the United States and the Soviet Union end up on opposite sides, although they're directly involved in the war, it's not quite the same as them directly fighting each other. So the first one we'll look at is the Korean War, which is in the 1950s. And again, North Korea is pushing southward into South Korea to try to make the entire country communist. What ends up happening at the end of this war, and technically it was a ceasefire, it was a police action. It never got to an actual armistice in terms of ending the war completely, because there are still U.S. soldiers on the 38th parallel, which is what divides North and South Korea today. Northern Korea is communist, Southern Korea is not. And it is still an armed border. North Korea has made no bones about the fact that it wants Korea to be one Korea, not two Koreas. And they frequently work at pushing southward into South Korea, which is why U.S. soldiers have stayed there, and why South Korea does not want the United States soldier or the United States support withdrawn from the country, because right now it's the only thing keeping them from falling to communism from the North Korea. So that is still a very tense place. The leader of North Korea is known for um, frequently working on nuclear weapons that are hidden as satellites or couched as satellites when they're really not. They are weapons of war. And they make no bones about the fact that they do not, under any circumstance, like the United States. And if given a chance, they would not hesitate to use those weapons against the United States. So it's a very touchy situation, even though the armed fighting between the two countries ended in the 1950s. So, in terms of success, it's not a win for the United States because we're again maintaining half of the country as non-communist, but the other half is communist, and the South is always under threat. So that is still an ongoing issue today. This next one we're going to look at is Vietnam. Now, this one I had to pull the video from a different place, and I've had some students be able to see it and others not. So if you can complete this, I will count it as an extra credit grade for you. If it won't load for you, however, it's okay to move on to the next lesson. It won't hurt you in any way. But this will sort of give you a window into both sides of Vietnam. Vietnam is fairly close to Korea. Same situation here, only the outcome is different. So you're looking at Vietnam. It shows you, well, I'm sorry, here's a map. Shows you the map of Vietnam here. And what happens is the United States, again, very actively involved in the Vietnam War from the 1960s up into the 1970s. But this became a very, very costly war for the United States to be involved in, both in terms of actual cost, military cost, and in terms of human lives. And at the time in the 1960s and 70s, there was a very definite pushback from the American people to not be involved. We felt like it was so far away. If they become communist, okay. The American people did not support the Vietnam War, and unfortunately, did not support Vietnam soldiers who had fought in Vietnam, American soldiers who had fought in Vietnam very well. That they did not get the same kind of homecoming that men and women from wars after that got, kind of as heroes. They did not get that. They were, in many cases, badly treated when they came back to the United States or blamed for this conflict. Eventually, the United States government decides they've had enough and they're going to pull out of Vietnam. And it's really interesting to look at what happens because literally the minute that they are able to get out of Vietnam. It falls. South Vietnam falls to the communist, and today Vietnam is a communist country. The freedom to come and go is limited there. Many Vietnamese came to the United States and went to other places, and they can go back and visit family. In talking to some of those people, they're always somewhat cautious of doing that because there are still issues in the country because it is a communist country. Your freedom is relatively curtailed. So I've got an ed puzzle for you that you should be able to watch with no trouble about the Vietnam War. Sorry, let me get to this here. Okay, so here I want you to think about, is it right for the United States to try to stop the spread of communism in other places? And like most opinion questions, there's not a right and wrong answer to this question, but you have to put your answer in such a way that it shows me that you understand what happened in Korea and Vietnam. So make sure you watch this video to help you a little bit. And then I want you to answer two questions. One, should the U.S. have gotten involved in Korea and Vietnam? Again, your opinion is your opinion, but you must support it with reasons. All right. So make sure you're giving the evidence. Like, for instance, if you talk about the number of deaths that were caused, that's a little bit too vague unless you use some actual numbers and some facts for your evidence. Most of you take a step towards giving me evidence, but it's done in such general terms that I can only give you partial credit for it. You have to show me that you understand what really happened there. And again, you have to post a classmate response. If you say, I agree, you must state what you agree with. Be specific. I agree, or I think that's a good answer, is not going to get you credit for answers for a classmate response. Think of it as a conversation with that student and explain to them what you agreed with or what you didn't agree with. That's fine as well. So good luck. Let me know if you have any questions.